There are hints right now that Ohio Governor John Kasich is entertaining a run, maybe even an independent run for president in 2020. What do you think of that?
I think it's really fascinating. You know, the founding fathers never envisioned political parties. Right now, politically, I'm dedicating myself to try and bring an end to this duopoly. It doesn't seem to make a difference whether Democrats or Republicans are in office.
All right. Gary Johnson, of course, a frequent third-party candidate, libertarian candidate, has said that he welcomes alternatives to the two established parties, Democrats and Republicans. The latest hint, and I stress hint because Governor John Kasich of Ohio has not said that he's entertaining any serious presidential run as a Republican challenger to the president or, for example, a third-party challenger. But there is buzz to that effect. The Washington Examiner's Sarah Westwood on that. How realistic is this proverbial third-party challenge? It festers every 4 years. It seems to be given a little bit more currency now, but what do you think?
Well, I think there are a lot of institutional forces working against third parties in this country. Ballot access thresholds are really difficult for third-party candidates to overcome in a number of states, at least at the presidential level. There are polling thresholds to participate in things like debates. And the infrastructure of the Democratic and Republican parties is just so vast that it would take years for any organization to match the kind of strength, the money that those two organizations have. If somebody like John Kasich were to run as a third-party candidate against Donald Trump in 2020, all that would really do would be to guarantee that the Democratic challenger would win the election, because the likely situation would be Kasich splitting Republican voters with President Trump.
You know, Gary Johnson had always bemoaned the fact that there's the other element of not getting a seat at a debate table, and that without that, you're sort of like in a vacuum. What if a Kasich or whomever were to come along and get that seat at the table and see at an even footing that, wait a minute, this guy sounds intriguing or this guy doesn't sound intriguing?
Well, I think even if the polling threshold for presidential debates were lowered such that a third-party candidate like Gary Johnson could participate, remember in 2016 that threshold was 15%.
Right.
Gary Johnson could never quite get there. Even if they were to lower that threshold, the third-party candidate would still have to somehow try to match the kind of spending that political action committees, outside groups, are throwing money at these traditional Democratic and Republican candidates. They still would have to try to match the kind of organization, state by state, that Republicans and Democrats have, and they don't have a bench of down ballot candidates from which to draw a viable third-party nominee. So all of those forces are working against someone like Gary Johnson or John Kasich.
I agree with you, sir. It's an uphill climb, and we've seen it even with those who take on and challenge their own president within their party. It's an uphill battle, and I'm wondering whether it was Ronald Reagan challenging then incumbent President Gerald R. Ford for the Republican nomination in 1976, or Ted Kennedy taking on then President Jimmy Carter for the Democratic nomination. It almost always ends in defeat for the party that's divided, right?
Right, but what we are seeing, and what Kasich and Gary Johnson are correct about, is that at least up until 2016, leaders on both sides of the aisle were not being responsive to the desires of their voters. On the left,
right.
We saw Bernie Sanders take positions that were thought to be far left of what a Democratic nominee could hold, but all the energy and enthusiasm were on his side in the primary. On the right, President Trump staked out new positions on things like trade and immigration that allowed him to cruise past the rest of the candidates.
Very good point, sir. We shall see. A little too early. A little more to this.